Hi, and welcome to Experience Week. We are excited to have you with us today. This presentation is titled Employee Experience, the Winning Playbook by Elliott of Kennedy Fitch. Elliott specializes in coaching and bringing together leaders through digital transformations and building people's strategy based on the employee experience and design thinking. He is a thought leader and former head of people strategy in 4 global firms, Pfizer, AkzoNobel, Novartis, and Fujitsu Siemens, and he has worked and lived in 4 countries plus New Jersey. Before we jump into his content, some quick housekeeping items. First, feel free to share this event with your colleagues. It's not too late to register. And let others know that you're watching by tweeting at Qualtrics with the hashtag ExperienceWeek. And all of today's content will be available on demand for you to enjoy. The time is now yours, Elliott.
Thanks, Lisa. Really excited to be with you here today and to be part of Experience Week. We're excited to share some brand new research that we have about employee experience and what we find companies have put together, what we think is the winning playbook, how to do this. Our desire today is to share some best practices and ideas with you, and it's not to give you the detailed playbook, but a sample, a taste, and point you in the right direction where you can get some more information. So whether you're just getting started and are thinking about how you want to do this, or you're already underway in designing your employee experience, I want to share some tools and insights that can help you to really make this work even better. I also want to share with you some talking points, especially for those of you who are finding it challenging to work with CEOs and other leaders to help them understand why this is important. Give you some talking points and some ammunition so you can help them understand and bring them on board. This is really the most critical part of getting started and being able to successfully implement. Also, we want to look high level from start to finish at the employee experience and share with you some high level details of the why, what, and how. We've also created a detailed PDF employee experience winning playbook report, which you can order from us if you just register. I'll share my email details at the end, or you can look me up on LinkedIn and send me a message. This is a free report, and in there we give you much more details and share also some case examples of the companies that we interviewed who we consider as employee experience pioneers. So let's dig in, and I want to really quickly today in our presentation why this matters. What's important about employee experience and how we got here, how this even came about as a movement, as something that companies are doing. There are a lot of reasons why, and technology is a big part of that. I want to talk about how customer experience and employee experience have evolved, what employee experience is and how it's reshaping organizations, and share with you some of the research about what's happening now and what people think is happening in the next 1 to 2 years, how it's taking shape. I will share some short case studies of 6 employee experience pioneers and how they've used employee experience as the key to their business transformation, and talk about the real deep kind of DNA change that's required for this. And then we'll talk lastly about how you design the employee experience and what this looks like. So let's get started. Before we get going, I wanted to explain what matters to me and who we are as Kennedy Fitch. So Kennedy Fitch is a group of former business heads and heads of people strategy who are consultants mostly in North America and Europe. And the bulk of our experience is leading people strategy in countries worldwide, in companies, global companies. And we specialize in digital and disruptive organizational transformations, and also really knowledge sharing with networks and networks that we've built in different countries in Europe and the US on the future of work. I have to confess, I am a recovering head of talent, as Lisa mentioned, in several companies, and I know how it's been done in the past and a lot of mistakes and things, learning from that that needs to change. So one of the things that I like to do is help business leaders and HR leaders understand how to make the transition from the old way of thinking to the new, because this is really, I think, the most important part. Let's talk about megatrends and what's going on in the world around us. First of all, big demographics changes. There are 1 billion or more new people coming onto the internet in the next few years, at the same time that we're seeing 1 billion people retire, and the workforce is really changing. We now have more than 50% of our workforce that are millennials. These new people that are coming in have no brand loyalty, no prior experience with digital brands. So there's a lot of openness for change there. The way new people coming on, they will eat, drink, buy, shop, everything that they do on the internet. They'll do that differently than anyone has in the past. They will also be looking to join the job market through these new platforms and apps that are becoming more prevalent. And they're people that are really looking for the employee experience and the values and the type of environment that really suits their personal development needs. So a lot of this employee experience and customer experience, frankly, is being driven by this. Competition, as we know, is coming from everywhere, and wealth is spreading. There are 200 new billionaires from emerging markets in the last few years, and people are expecting that we'll see wealth coming from what we're calling frontier countries in Africa and Southeast Asia, et cetera. The other changing is there's a lot of pressure on companies. They're not lasting as long as they used to. The average lifespan, the duration of, or half-life of a business competency has dropped. So a lot of companies that used to be prominent in the Fortune 500 are not on the list today. So competition and the changing landscape of companies. There's something called Exponential Organizations. I think one of the best books out there right now is written by Salim Ismail on exponential organizations, or EXOs as he calls them. This is a type of organization that has disproportionately large, 10 times larger impact compared to its peers. So think of Uber, or think of companies that are using digital platforms, for example, that just have low cost or no cost of use. And one of the key features of these exponential organizations is that they're using new kinds of organizational techniques that use technology, including digital. So that's what this is all about. We've learned to scale technology, and now it's time for us to learn how to scale some of the other things that we do in terms of people, culture, and things that are internal to companies. Here are a couple of quick technologies. We see 3D printing, drones, solar, neurotech, medicine, full body scans, how fast these things have scaled compared to organizations in the past, and some attributes of what these organizations look like in terms of, for example, you have staff on demand, some people are calling Agile Talent, or people that are externals. They operate off of algorithms and analytics. Engagement and employee experience is a key part of how these organizations attract and develop people. This slide is talking about how organizations fail to keep up with technology. I think we know that. And this is looking at the digital paradigm, shifting from a couple of key ideas that we had in the past that we really had in the way of hardwired in our thinking in organizations, where, for example, we own and manage talent. The idea of talent management or human capital is outmoded. Today, like marketing, we really have to set up a brand and set up the right kind of experience and platform for people to attract the best people. Some of our people processes like performance management and Nightbox are being shifted to more of a focus on development and feedback, more future focus in the way we interact and give people feedback. The idea that our talent is only our full-time employees to talent includes all kinds of externals that interact with us. This makes digital platforms and the employee experience all the more important. And also the idea that companies own the data on us as people and as talent, to the idea that we own and share and probably could even charge companies to use our data in the future. Here's about companies are using a company that helps interface organizations with what we call Agile or External Talent. This is Andela, and they're on the internet. They look for top tech talent, STEM talent in Africa, because Africa is a huge continent. There's a lot of young people, fast-growing economies, and increasing fast-growing pools of very well-educated and very quick, smart people. They make an onboarding process very easy. They manage this for companies. So it's really outsourced recruiting and onboarding, and the cost is zero. So this is a very exciting kind of platform that companies are learning to use. It's a good example. Also, shape and the way of working, if you think about the way we used to operate with fixed org charts and job descriptions and pay grades and fixed teams and the way people interacted, to more modular, more agile teams, and the idea that teams are constantly shifting, going by different goals and projects. There's more free flow of information and feedback. Even the rewards and so on are changing also for different types of projects. So the shape of work within organizations has also changed. This is all true. I want to talk about, for a few minutes, is there a business case or an ROI for employee experience? Second question is, what is employee experience and how is it different from engagement? There's a lot of confusion about whether or not engagement and employee experience are the same thing. And how do you build an employee experience-centric organization? Is there a specific recipe or set of, as some people would say, for example, 10 or 17 specific ingredients to building the perfect employee experience? Or is it something that's done a little bit differently? So let's talk about the business case. So employee experience really started and is based a lot on patterns exactly like customer experience. So the whole theory, the background, the concept behind it is very similar. The idea that people interact with an organization with technology, they have more choice. The power of choice is shifted to the consumer and to the employee because of technology. And because of technology, we can analyze and even start to predict behavior. That's a key part of this whole underlying principle. One of the things that is so important to stress with all this, whether you're looking at CX or EX, is that it's not just about going out and acquiring this as the next shiny new thing. This requires, both of these require a fundamental DNA shift, a transformation, if you will, that is really going from towards outside-in thinking, design thinking, and even how teaching companies how to interact with digital technology and tools is really key. So there are a couple of things, for example, that we'll talk about. Changing the leadership mindset is really key as a start. Companies talk about this as a big obstacle they have to overcome. Building that culture that's employee-centric or customer-centric is big. This is what we do with companies, is the leadership mindset, the culture. Also, simplifying the way we make decisions, the processes, the rules that we have in organizations, just rethinking all of this. We want to help organizations. We try to help them become a lot more like marketing and integrate things like design, moving towards from classic L&D to bite-sized learning, more development focus in performance. And really what happens in the end is that companies end up changing their org structure for both business and for HR, and a lot of these traditional silos or boundaries between these functions are eliminated or reduced. So carrying forward on the business case of customer insights, there's been a lot of research that shows that CX leaders really outperform the market 2 to 1 or greater over some longitudinal studies that have been done. Morgan, who wrote a book about the employee experience that just came out this year, did a lot of research on how well employee experience leaders compare to companies who do not have the concept of the employee experience, and came up with some really interesting comparisons. employee experience companies are found more often in lists like most innovative companies or best places to work or best brands 4.5, 6 times, 3 times more frequently. They're 40 times more frequently in the list of exponential organizations. And as you can see, these last 4 categories, average revenue, average profit, and the profitability is quite a few times above the non-employee experience competitors. So what we like to say is that one of the reasons for putting in customer and employee experience is if you want to outgrow your competition significantly, you should look at something that designs the company around the needs of your customers and employees. It's a very simple but very powerful concept. So a few years ago, we used to talk about the idea that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And I like to use this analogy in explaining to people who ask me, what's the difference between employee experience and engagement? They are really completely different worlds in many different ways. They're important. First of all, think about where engagement came from. The whole idea of engagement came from organizations that were very hierarchical. There was top-down thinking. Everything was designed around the way the company thought and worked. The opposite is true with employee experience. This is a bottom-up, outside-in. It's designed around the individual. Engagement was built around as a response to current practices. Here's what we did. How do you like it? That's basically the, maybe oversimplified, but not by too much, the idea behind engagement. Whereas design thinking is what matters to you. Here's some information that we're sharing with you. What would be more helpful? So it's really much more information, much more centered around more qualitative type questions, 1 or 2 questions, maybe combined with Net Promoter Score, that just open up and help people understand what are the drivers. Another way to think about this sometimes in communications is to think about what are the 3 things that motivated or high-performing people in the organization think about, what matters to them. So you can even use a combination of analytics with a pulse survey to ask a few qualitative questions that are open-ended to get at what really drives best performance here. And as you know, engagement surveys used to be run every 1 or 2 years. If everybody was happy about the organization, if they didn't feel good about the way things were going, a lot of times senior management would cancel the engagement survey. So employee experience is really based on the idea of continuous feedback, and it's much more centered around giving that feedback to a local team or a local team leader. So the final thing with engagement is engagement scores over the last 20, 25 years have been falling year on year. So it's really, despite the fact we've been doing engagement surveys, they really don't work. And whereas, as we saw a few moments ago, the idea of employee experience is going to unlock some serious growth potential for companies. It's interesting, and this is one of the reasons why we did this research, is that we found there wasn't any standard definition of employee experience out there. So one of the things we asked in our survey this summer was, how do companies define the employee experience? And only 15% of the 250 plus companies that responded to us have a definition. Here are some examples. The thing that I want to emphasize with this slide is that rather than having a specific recipe or secret sauce that says this is what it is and this is what every company should think, what they should think about employee experience, this really is a new kind of idea in the sense that it's really designed to your context, to your culture. And the definitions about employee experience are all based around the way people connect, the way they relate, the kinds of feelings and emotions they have about things. It still can be something that companies use to discover what drives productivity and best performance in teams. But it's really centered around the individual, and it's really centered around the culture in the organization. So I really want to stress that this is something that is no longer a one-size-fits-all benchmarking type of thing. So let's talk about how to build an employee-centric org. I'm going to share a little bit of our survey results here. So what we did, because this is such a new concept, employee experience, for example, the oldest head of employee experience in any company that we could find was Mark Levy at Airbnb, and we interviewed Mark. Mark has been there since December of 2013, so not even quite 4 years at this date. And most of the people, heads of employee experience, have been there a year or maybe 18 months. That's it. And we could only find in our research 40 or 50 heads of employee experience, which we take to mean that a company's made this significant step in building, designing this. We interviewed, because we assumed that most companies were very early in that journey, we sent out a survey to several thousand organizations worldwide. Over 250 companies responded, and you see kind of the size here. We had companies over 50,000, we had companies from 10 to 50, and we also had a significant number of startups and smaller organizations around the globe. And these people told us some really fascinating things about how they're thinking about this, how important this is, whether it's changing in importance, what are some of the key obstacles and challenges, why do they do this, and they shared some things about how they get feedback and how they built it. Now, assuming that this was new for most of these companies, which we did discover this was the case, for most companies they haven't done this, we went out and interviewed these employee experience pioneers, and we share in our full report the case studies of 6 of those. So you see some well-known brands here, GE, Airbnb, ING, and also some smaller companies like Maxis or LearnVest that are doing some really interesting things that each have their business case. Some more things about our survey. This is really interesting. The idea that 3 out of 4 companies said that building the employee experience was important, very important, or extremely important for the organization. So it's on virtually everyone's radar, 3 out of 4 companies. 90%, 4 out of 5 said that they expected that employee experience would become even more important in the next 1 to 2 years, 90%. So that's really a high figure. But the interesting thing about that is when we asked them about whether or not they feel they've made significant progress on employee experience, only 6% of these 250 plus companies feel their organization has really made some significant progress. So this gives you an idea. If you're just getting started, you don't need to feel like you're behind the curve. There are a lot of companies that are in your same situation, and this is another reason why we are so excited to share this information with companies and help really raise everybody up to another level. The other thing that we found out is that we asked why they did this, why it's critical, and companies listed business growth, number 1, and number 3 was competitive advantage. They also talked about profitability. So there were really strong business cases here. The only one that didn't have to do with a particular business case was engagement, which came in at number 2. And interesting thing about engagement as how it's being used with companies who have built the employee experience, they don't use engagement as a centerpiece KPI. What they do is they use engagement in a pulse survey with a short set of questions designed around the things that they've designed into their employee experience as kind of a temperature check. So even the role of engagement has shifted. The design of engagement surveys has shifted. So we asked people about how well their digital people strategy and employee experience are fully integrated. So as you would expect, a very low number, in fact 14% said that it was. And a lot of companies are using different kinds of feedback apps and tools, and even bolt-ons to big systems like Workday and Oracle PeopleSoft and SAP. So that's another area we could do in another broadcast, is talk about all the feedback apps and some really interesting ones that are being designed fit for purpose. talk to us about biggest challenges about building or designing employee experience. These are the kinds of things that companies talk about. Number one, no surprise, transforming the culture. It really, because it's a radical shift or a big change in your DNA to becoming an outside-in employee or customer experience centered organization, it really requires a whole different kind of thinking. So the best companies that are most successful, and this is where we get involved, are the ones that really spend a lot of time doing a transformation to make the application of employee experience and customer experience successful. That's really the number one. Leadership mindset goes along with this. So employee experience companies that we interviewed talked about the CEO and the leaders at all levels have to be on board for this to succeed. We interviewed quite a few who were not successful, or they're pausing this while they do their cultural transformation. And the commonality there for most of them is that they don't have senior management sponsorship for this. A lot of companies are also talking about complexity. So the fact that it's difficult to implement something that is really centered and designed on simplicity. So they're reducing rules and regulations, making things more sensible is key also to a digital strategy for a company with employees. Companies report a lack of internal expertise. Some companies have a limited budget. And when we ask them open-endedly to tell us what are some of their other challenges, they really talk about top leadership and culture still as key. So that gives you an idea of some of the things you're going to have to face in building them. So these are the 6 companies that we profile in our full report. I'll spend a little bit of time in just a few minutes talking about these companies and what they experienced with this. So the idea is that each one of these really had a different kind of business case that they did. So, for example, Airbnb, as I mentioned, is one of the pioneers in this. They've been doing this for almost 4 years, which is a long, long time, a lot longer than anyone else. They saw this as a way to scale their culture. When Mark Levy joined the company in late 2013, one of the 2 founders really emphasized to him, don't screw up the culture, and really wanted, as he said, the anti-HR, something that did not resemble traditional HR in their organization. So they really saw building employee experience as a way to do that. And he's one of the people that pioneered the idea of going out, interviewing, listening to people, really understanding what drives our culture here at Airbnb, what makes us unique, looking at people outside of work as well as inside, really understanding, spending time to interview and understand how people worked. And also, they really made the connection with their hosts and so on. And so they designed the experience and focused on parts of the experience where employees were giving gifts and interacting with hosts and making the host experience also better. So we saw very early days some interaction on the customer side. Another one of these companies we talked to was LearnVest, Lena Stern. Lena Stern is the head of employee experience at LearnVest, and she's somebody that is a big believer in analytics. And they saw, this was an interesting case because Northwestern Mutual bought LearnVest with the idea of, we want to become like a tech startup. We want to be faster. We want to be digital. LearnVest was built around the idea of apps for financial services for the millennial generation, and Northwestern wanted that culture inside the organization. So Lena's done a great job of designing customized journeys. For example, she shared with me the onboarding experience, what they've done, and the graph. It's like the infographics that are in there are just Very cool. So this is the way they built and scaled their culture. ABN AMRO, the one with the green and yellow here, they are a Dutch bank, a multinational bank, quite large in Amsterdam. And they use both the employee and the customer experience to radically change the business structure. It started with the customer experience. Banking is a hotbed of customer and employee experience because banks are so competitive. It's a very disrupted industry, and it's an industry that, because of the financial shakeout over the last few years, they're seeing this as a great opportunity to recharge the business and anticipate also new changes, more changes in the market. So what Frank Vandenbrink did there was really cool in terms of designing the employee experience and different journeys, creating personas, and really bringing together, as Airbnb and others have, GE, ING, bringing these different disciplines, design, analytics, marketing, brand, and building this. And in a lot of these companies, what we're seeing today is that they end up with a radically different looking organization. They don't have a classic HR silo anymore. HR can involve facilities. It can involve brand and design. For example, in Airbnb, they're not even part of the same reporting line, but they act as though they are. And this is really the new paradigm. Maxis is a really exciting company. Munir Azuzi, they're based in Malaysia. Coming out of the 90s, they were the #1 telecom company, and a few years ago, they lost their #1 position and needed to really retool. So their CEO took things under his charge and said, we've got to flatten the organization, we've got to become disruptive, and we need to really act like a much leaner new company. And so they went from, I can't remember how many, I think it was 30 different levels or so, down to 5. And so they really flattened the organization, got rid of all titles, so people are ahead of a function, but there are no VP or director titles anymore. Sometimes companies like Maxis have a fallout. There were several hundred people that left the organization. They lost about 30% of their employee base. ING is another interesting one. They started with a customer experience focus, and they saw the same need to do the same thing on the employee side. And this was not done as with several of these others, as an HR project. It was done as a company project. And here's one of the things that we're seeing with all of this is that rather than saying, from what I've observed, rather than saying companies are using this as a way to transform, what companies that are pioneers in this is that they are first saying, as business leaders, we need to be disruptive. We need to transform the way we think and operate here, and designing our business around the customer and employees is the best way to do that. It's the most effective, impactful way to do that, as we saw earlier in the business case. So the idea of transformation for the business and designing the employee and customer experience go really hand in hand. The last one I'll mention is GE. So we talked to Paul Davies there, who's head of employee experience, and they recognized early on that this was a way to really accelerate growth and productivity and business results at GE. And they went out, and Paul talked to lots of different companies all across different industries. So to get an idea of how they had done this or how they were thinking about this, Airbnb was an early inspiration for him. And they really, when they listened to employees and design the experience, one of the things I remember that Paul talked about is they really listen for feelings and emotions. And that's a very powerful place, because if you think about feelings and emotions, those are deeper, stronger insights into behavior than most of the things that we pay attention to. And analytics tools, but especially talking to people is really key. Most of the companies that we talked to in interviews, but that we also surveyed, they used multiple channels for listening. I'll talk about that in a second. But the thing that is common to all of them is that no matter what digital tools they used for listening and feedback, they all spent a lot of personal interaction time. And this is where the idea of design thinking comes into this, because design thinking starts with observing, following, watching, asking the right kinds of questions, and really paying attention to what people are doing as a start. So we wrote an article earlier this year about how to design a people strategy based on the employee experience. And what we found in our research is that a lot of these principles still hold true. It really starts with shifting or changing the mindset. It's really a whole new way of seeing things in organizations. The purpose, the user-focused thinking, the idea of changing the way your natural response is to things. So it's that whole outside-in thinking that is the starting place for all of this, and that's why it's key to begin with leaders at all levels in organizations, and you absolutely have to have your CEO and leadership team on board first. Once you get that sponsorship and that understanding, it really goes to deep listening, and as we talked about a moment ago, at all levels, multiple channels, but especially that human interaction. And then looking at the insights and what are you doing? What do you learn from that? What is it telling? What's predictive? What are feelings and emotions telling us? And then from there, only after you do that, can you design the employee experience. And this is, from there, the sequence goes into designing the people strategy. So a lot of companies start, think of the old way we used to do this. We design the people strategy, then we would design the processes and the way people interacted with us. So this is completely backwards to what we used to do. And then as you practice and implement, there's the idea of testing and piloting, which is borrowed also from design thinking. And then you go back into this loop again. So you use that information to further change your mindset and go from there. So that's the idea, is this continuous loop, the idea of design thinking, and this is what companies are doing and what we try to bring into organizations to help them design the employee experience. So is there a secret sauce, or is this more like a chef's to-taste recipe? I would argue that what we found in our research and in our experience in talking to companies, it's much more the latter. This is not something that you have a complex set of steps, and if you miss any of these or miss any of the characteristics that people will tell you is the common benchmark, that's just not simply the case. It's something that has to be designed to your organization, and this is the beauty of this. And I think this is where a lot of companies will have to make a break with the past. This is no longer about benchmarking or applying a model from somebody else, but finding out what works here, what fits us in our culture and our way of doing things. Thinking back to what Airbnb and others have talked about in terms of being able to scale the culture. So it starts with that multi-channel listening. The next thing that companies do is they move on to looking at some of the holistic journeys and as a test, just kind of a framework. And then they spend more time talking to people. They listen for emotions and feelings. Some companies will create personas, and we'll talk about that in a few seconds. And only then, after they do that, do they start to design around these things. What do they see? What do they reflect back as the employee experience and the different journeys that people have? Then once they do that, before they implement, is that they test and they prototype, and they really try to see how does it work, and they make adjustments and adapt to what they see. And finally, as an outgrowth of this, as I said before, this is the point when you can really launch a digital people strategy and define what that digital people strategy is, rather than the old way of doing it first. We found in our research that, as I mentioned, companies are using all kinds of tools, all kinds of channels, and they're doing this simultaneously. So this is something that takes some time in our experience. It can take weeks or months, but it's something that is done. A lot of companies are doing what they call hackathons, and we've seen these, we've experienced these in several different types of environments. What's important about hackathons, I would say, is that, or any of this, including creating personas and so on, make sure you don't just have HR people in the room or just one function. Really go out and bring in people that are representative of your organization. This is a good way to bring in diverse thinking and really, amp up your diversity and inclusion in your people strategy. A lot of different feedback tools. We share a few of them here. So we talked about surveys, face-to-face, focus groups, apps, hackathons. The thing that's interesting about these is the ones that companies are finding, the companies that we work with or talk to about this, finding most valuable are the ones that involve face-to-face. They're using design thinking. They're really shaking it up with some different types of things. Value stream mappings, journeys have been things that have been borrowed from customer experience for years. They're using Kaizen, Yammer. They're looking at Glassdoor, so all types of sources. And then once they do this, they start to map out at least the skeletal, what are the holistic journeys? And these are the 4 or 5 main, most frequently mentioned journeys that companies are doing. So including recruiting and onboarding as one holistic journey. The thing that's interesting about this, when we talked to GE and several others, and they said, Paul Davies shared, we have 45,000 people that get accepted every year and 2 million that apply. So what happens to those other rest of the 2 million that don't get into the company? And GE really looks at that as also their target audience. These are people that they want to build a brand and a certain kind of impression or experience with these people because they will be customers and they'll be maybe future employees of the company. So they're looking more broadly other than just the people that you hire. Development is really focusing, including also performance management, but also going more of a development focus, more of a future focus, and more of a how to help managers develop some better feedback tools or better feedback capabilities as part of this. It's also looking at the idea of learning on the job and shifting from traditional classroom interactions to learning journeys and workshops that involve coaching and bite-sized learning and including YouTubes and other digital tools. Lena Stern at LearnBest, they help people, they line them up with a production assistant who can help them develop YouTubes that they use in recruiting and onboarding, but also training and development. So there's some really interesting things going on there. We're listening for emotion. So what are some of the things that help us get insights into what matters to people? So you'll hear something about moments that matter. It's more than that. It's more holistic, and it's also looking at, along the way, insights about what drives behavior and decisions that people make. Airbnb talks about their founders' obsession with Disney and the idea of storytelling and the idea that every frame matters, and they use this concept a lot in the way they built their employee experience workshops and listening to people. GE talked about constantly referring back to their design and where they heard people expressing feelings and emotions and how they refer to this every day. So once you have this information, then you're able to look at creating some personas and looking at what the journey might look for one of these personas. So one company that we talked about looked at people that were in different stages of their career and regular employees. They looked at people that were leading the company. They looked at managers as one one persona group. So it depends on what you get out of your analysis of this, how you want to do this. But once you get to this stage, what you want to do is create this type of journey for each one of these people. Moving forward, using that, design experiences. And this is an example where you've got recruiting, onboarding, doing my job, performance, feedback and evaluation, and career management. I have a lot of really interesting examples that we share in our workshops or that I've got from our research, but I do not share proprietary information, so this is something I pulled off of public domain on the web. But I think it's a really great example of what the designing of experiences looks like. And then once you have this, take this out and do testing and prototyping. And what we try to do is work with parts of the business where you think you're most likely to be successful, where you have key sponsors, where you have leadership support, where you have the best feedback. So find a part of the organization where you think you can test this and try this and have really good interaction and data coming out of this to prototype your employee experience journeys. And then once you have completed that, then you're able to go in and design and launch your people strategy. The goal of the people strategy is really to look at end-to-end, how do we design something that is the best interaction, providing the best platform, the best opportunities for growth, development, innovation, diversity for your company. And a key part of this is also analytics and some of the things you can do. So we borrowed this from Thomas Friedman, but 6 things your digital strategy should be able to do. We find this in common with what we do with digital strategy overall. Analyze, being able to have analytics, look at patterns, and being able to understand, maybe even predictively, what are people most likely to do. Some companies will do this with personas, to the idea that they can look at people that are at risk. Why do people leave our organization? So understanding key drivers there. A lot of companies struggle with the idea that if they have expat talent, that these people leave within a year or two of their expat assignment completion. So understanding some of these patterns and behaviors and building some remedies for that. They're the key in the digital strategies, being able to look at what drives performance in teams. What are teams that are performing well, what are they doing? And how can we help build optimization around all teams? Talking about predictive analytics and understanding, again, how can you tell when your employees are most likely to perform at their best? Employee experience and customer experience are all about customizing, and we've talked about this around personas and around how to customize this for your environment, and also the idea that digitization and automation are a key part of this. There's a key difference between digitization. A lot of companies feel like when they buy Workday or SAP, SuccessFactors, or one of these HCM, HRIT systems, that's becoming digital. That's an important step in becoming digital, and it's a step in the right direction of creating a digital platform. But what companies that are employee experience pioneers will tell you is that digital is about your whole business model. It's really about a way of working, and the idea that the digital and the human interaction go hand in hand. There's the tendency with a lot of companies that once they have these IT systems that everything is self-service. That's not a digital people strategy. So some really important things there to consider. A lot of companies that have gone through this have really worked on establishing a digital people strategy, but we find this is also very early days. 29% of the companies that we interviewed and surveyed did not have a digital people strategy. They haven't integrated it with employee experience, and they're really in early stages. So this is something also that companies are really still just getting their hands around. I just want to share a couple of final thoughts on what we learned from talking to some of these employee experience pioneers. They really talk about you have to have a sponsorship of the CEO, the top leadership team, really put the employee at the center of your thinking. Really try to look at this as a long-term change in mindset and way of working. And the idea that if you're able to create happy employees, you will have happy and satisfied customers. One of the things that I'll just share quickly that we also will go over in our workshops and in our report is that there's a big impact. You know, you can imagine if a company goes through to this length of transformation, there are some changes, some permanent changes in the org structure, in the way companies look and operate. Quite a few of these companies that we saw that are employee experience pioneers, the head of employee experience becomes the de facto head of HR. A lot of CHRO roles are disappearing and being replaced by head of employee experience. In some companies like Adobe, we see the head of employee experience and customer experience. So the idea that you bring both of those together in one function, and that a lot of these organizations, a lot of the traditional silos break down. So you see HR and marketing, along with design and IT and facilities, either formally coming into a structure or more often working de facto as teams. There's a lot more agility, flexibility, fluidity in these companies that we have observed. I mentioned that in many companies that they're seeing the head of employee experience take over the traditional CHRO. And within HR, we're seeing that a lot of changes are taking place, that you're seeing more people that are involved with their new roles that are being designed. So there's HR deployment, there are onboarding specialists, there's head of employee experience transformation, and heads of culture and these types of things. So they're more cross-functional teams. There's more of a mix of things like analytics and branding and some of these things that we talked about. So before we close, I just want to give you some quick information about where you can look to get more detail and insights about this. Send me a note or look me up on LinkedIn, and I'll send you the full report that we did with all of our research and case studies. And I'll send you also the link to our employee experience, customer experience resources page that has some of the very latest resources and research by Deloitte, by PwC, and lots of other organizations on both employee experience and customer experience. I invite you to come to one of our free workshops that we'll be doing in Zurich, Amsterdam, Brussels, and New York City in November and December. And if you'd like us to come present at your company, we'd be happy to do that as well. So I hope you found this useful. As I said, I hope it was a good taste or teaser for understanding more deeply what the employee experience is and understanding really what is the business case, the difference, what is the employee experience, and what is the transformation that's needed. I wish you success, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elliott, for your time. That was fantastic. And thank you to all of you for joining today. Tune in for the rest of Experience Week for more great content.